Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Emily Ferrier, here to bring you some uplifting stories in these trying times. Our first story, picture this. You're an American parent who, after a full day of listening to your children beg for a visit to the local drive-thru, is finally ready to give in to their wishes. At this particular drive-thru, however, you aren't picking up ice cream or French fries. You're picking up a furry foster animal. Sound too good to be true? It's not. Despite sweeping closure across the country, homeless pets are finding temporary housing faster than animal shelters find new ways to arrange foster care for hundreds of pets at home. Without the means to facilitate traditional adoptions, humane organizations have turned to social media to ask for help in finding foster homes for their furry charges. And many of their shelters have received amazing outpourings of support in their communities. We put out a plea for emergency fosters and received over 500 applications in a matter of days, which is nothing short of incredible. Asheville Humane Society staffer Megan Lavender told the Good News Network in an email this week. The really good news, however, is that many shelters in cities around the U.S. are experiencing the same amazing response from their communities. Take the Kern County Animal Shelter in Bakersfield, for example. Since the California shelter was forced to adapt to the statewide shutdowns, they decided to host a drive-through adoption day for their shelter cats and dogs. Much like a fast food restaurant, people would pull up in their cars with paperwork in hand. Instead of driving away with a burger and fries, however, they would get sent home with a foster pet, along with food and other supplies. The shelter's 2 drive-through events were successful beyond all expectation. More than 100 animals found homes by the end of the week. We rely on the public to adopt. When we don't have that avenue, we're left with no option to get animals out of the shelter. It's not healthy to have an animal sit in a cage for 30 days, Kern County Animal Services Director Nick Cullen told The Californian. With nowhere left to turn, Cullen put out the call on social media, asking the public to participate in the impromptu drive-through pickup event. Volunteers would fill out applications online before driving to the shelter and bursting into cries of joy as they were handed their lovable new friend to take home as a temporary foster. What we've seen from the community is like nothing we've seen before, he told the news outlet. We're floored with the response. Although California's recent quarantine order has prevented the shelter from hosting additional drive-through adoption days, the social media has still proven itself to be a critical tool for shelters and SPCA groups across the country. Shortly after, it became obvious that coronavirus was going to drastically disrupt everyday life. A Facebook group was utilized for animal care workers to brainstorm ideas, share what was working for them, and even to organize transfers of animals, Lavender told the Good News Network. The American Pets Alive shelter and rescue support Facebook page and website allows shelters and rescue charities to share life-saving advice, health tips, and ongoing coverage and information about COVID-19 and its effects on pets and people alike. The group is to provide and support shelters and rescues in their efforts to create sustainable, life-saving communities where every pet is given the chance at life, and to help organizations end the needless killing of pets and shelters and rescues. Whether you've attended a conference, participated in an apprenticeship through the Maddie's Fund Life-Saving Academy, or you just want to help and support from other professionals and volunteers, this page is for you. Through the COVID-19 pandemic, we're here to help you maintain life-saving, keeping pets and people safe, and provide up-to-the-minute information and guidance. For more information, you can visit their website. They have also created, through a detailed guide for animal shelters across the country. The American Pets Alive COVID Animal Shelter Preparedness Guide covers topics ranging from feral community cat protocol to how to get your community to help. There's even a chapter on found foster protocol for your chameleon, if you're that way inclined. So it's really nice to see that animals are not being forgotten about. According to American Pets Alive, the emergence of COVID-19 designates the need for a guide for shelters to make decisions to maintain life-saving operations. The possibility of open intake shelters having to shut down adoption operations does not affect the need to continue to admit animals in need of immediate shelter. The risks associated with this is that shelters take in more animals than they can provide housing for, live outcomes that could lead to unnecessary decisions. This preparedness guide offers a framework to ensure that no pet lives are lost and shelters are proactive in preparedness throughout this outbreak. So that's a great thing that's happened. So if you are a shelter owner, check out that. When we come back, more good news from this crisis.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about animal shelters' response to the outbreaks and the guide that they've set up online to try and help other shelters and potential pet owners through these times. And now, as homeowners around the world are being ordered into self-isolation in the COVID-19 outbreaks, legislators are making sure that society's most vulnerable people are offered the same protection. Homeless people across North America and Europe are being offered shelter in everything from unused hotel rooms to designated self-isolation centers. In London, Mayor Sadiq Khan booked 300 hotel rooms at discounted rates to house the city's rough sleepers for the next 12 weeks. The mayor's legislative team plans to continue working with the Intercontinental Hotels Group, IHG, to facilitate additional discount bookings should the crisis develop further during the coming months. The coronavirus outbreak affects everyone in London, and we must do all we can to safeguard everyone's health, not least these Londoners who face spending each night sleeping rough on the capital streets, said Khan in a statement. Rough sleepers already face a difficult and uncertain life, and I'm determined to do all I can to ensure they, along with all Londoners, are given the best protection possible. This is just one of the many initiatives that the UK government is implementing to get homeless people off the streets during these outbreaks. According to The Guardian's legislators are currently working to house rough sleepers in unused hotel rooms and other self-isolated commercial spaces. Not only is the space readily available, the research also says that housing the homeless in hotel rooms is less costly than hospital space. Similar to measures that have been implemented in California as well, Governor Gavin Newsom legislative team has reportedly secured roughly 4,000 hotel rooms statewide in the hopes that the initiative could help lead to permanent housing after the crisis have been contained. This opportunity to bring folks together and indoors and to try and get them into permanent housing when this is said and done, said Ali Sutton, State Deputy Secretary for Homelessness, in an interview with CAP Radio. The state has reportedly allocated more than $150 million to local governments working to house the homeless during the outbreaks, with another $50 million being distributed, renting travel trailers and hotel rooms as emergency shelter. A report from earlier this month outlined a similar initiative taking place in Seattle as well. Back in Europe, the Paris government has reportedly opened 2 separate isolation centers for homeless people who've tested positive for the coronavirus, but do not require hospitalization as the city has entered its lockdown. Another 80 sites have been designated as confirmed isolation spaces across the country, with 2,800 facilities identified as potential additions to the nationwide housing network. France's Military of Housing opened its isolation centers in Paris to cater to the city's homelessness as the coronavirus entered its city. Each has 150 beds for homeless people who test positive but don't need to be hospitalized. It'll be expanded across France, with authorities planning to open 1 center in every region and several centers in larger regions. Over 80 sites across the country have been chosen by authorities for now, with a total of 2,875 available places. Access to the centers will be decided based on medical advice, the ministry said. The Occitanie region in southwest France said on Wednesday that it would immediately open a center in Toulouse with 50 places from Wednesday night. It added that another center with 40 places would open in the region before the end of the week. Since the French government took strong measures to enforce self-isolation for all French residents, charities helping the homeless have had to stop much of their outreach work. This is due to a lack of people as employees and volunteers having to self-isolate or care for their children who are off school. Florent Guillen, the director of the nonprofit Federation for Actor of Solidarity, explained. He also said that groups don't have enough protection masks. Around 157,000 people are currently housed in French homeless shelters. The French government announced on Sunday that the end of the winter truce, during which no one can be asked to leave their current accommodation, has been delayed until the 31st of May. It was previously to end on the 31st of March. Housing centers must stay open to keep offering accommodation for people in precarious situations, the ministry said. So people are trying to do their best to help others that can't, that are in really tough situations and aren't able to self-isolate in their homes. because they don't have homes, and we need to be aware of that and do our best to help them as well. And when we come back, another positive story about what Little Free Libraries is doing during this time when we return from the break.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about what France is doing to help with its homeless population. And now, there are more than 75,000 little free libraries registered around the world. And people are now converting them into little free pantries for their communities during the COVID-19 crisis. Although little free pantries have been popping up in people's neighborhoods since 2016, these newly converted pantries are being hailed as particularly uplifting examples of how community kindness amidst the coronavirus outbreaks are happening. Pantries from Vancouver, Canada to Arlington, Massachusetts are now filled with toilet paper, with canned goods, books, hand sanitizer, and toiletries. My kids have invested a lot of time into just making sure there's stuff up there, a Minnesota woman told CNN. About their local pantry. The experience for them being able to be a part of something that gives back, it's really cool. As a means of respecting quarantine guidelines, local pantry caretakers are reminding visitors to wash their hands and sanitize the pantry door handles before handling its contents. If you want to look up instructions on how to build your own little free pantry, or check out a map of pantries near you, be sure and visit the Little Free website. Another piece of news here. 3D printing enthusiasts all over the world are voluntarily making free, biodegradable, protective, plastic-free masks for healthcare workers fighting the COVID-19 outbreak. And it's all thanks to a small business in upstate New York. Isaac Budman and Stephanie Keefe are the masterminds behind Budman Industries, a company that designs and sells custom 3D printers. The couple was inspired to start making the inexpensive masks after they heard about coronavirus testing sites that were recently set up in Syracuse, just 6 miles away from their home in Liverpool. Not only that, they read reports on how healthcare workers were in need of protective face shields. We started thinking about how we could help. What is something we can do with the resources available to us to help the healthcare workers? Budman told the New York Daily News. We thought, that's something our 3D printer can do. Budman and Keith then developed a prototype for single-use masks that can be printed in 1 hour and assembled in just 2 minutes. The elastic and foam strips used to secure the mask comfortably to the wearer's face can be bought in a variety of stores. Since the Dynamic Duos project has been featured across national news outlets, they've recruited the help of local teachers to produce the masks in classrooms across the school district. Budman Industries has also published the templates and assembly instructions for the masks for free on their website. As more and more healthcare teams have reached out to the couple about getting face masks of their own, hundreds of volunteers from around the world have offered to join the company in 3D printing masks for free. According to CNN, the mask design has already been downloaded for their website more than 2,000 times. It's really amazing to see how this is making people come together. And help each other during these times, seeing them, like if anything, it's bringing us all together more than ever before, seeing people volunteering and helping each other out. And similarly, in Montana, Billings Clinic neurosurgeon Dusty Richardson developed a design for reusable 3D printed surgical masks so that he and his fellow community members could donate the masks to their local healthcare workers. He, like the couple before, also made the blueprints and the assembly instructions, and these are also available online completely for free, so his fellow 3D printing enthusiasts can make their own. If you have the means to do this and to donate, please do. Obviously, there is a lot going on and a lot of people that are in need of assistance and help in these times. There are a lot of institutions that are in need of help, so do help them out if you have the means and the time and can, while keeping a safe distance, of course. And when we come back, more people that are fighting to help others during this time.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about people printing out some 3D masks to help with the shortages. And now, in a national emergency, some people's initial thoughts are to fight over toilet paper. Others, like Good News Network reader Trina Brunella, immediately wanted to leap to the aid of those on the front lines of the crisis. Trina began constructing and sewing cloth masks for a project in Indiana to help teenage cancer patients undergoing chemotherapy. Then wanted to donate more masks to workers at 4 local chemo centers in New Jersey, spurred on by a friend of hers whose mother has cancer, and right now she's using a bandana. Cloth masks are useful because they keep your hands from touching your nose and mouth, especially out in public, where you don't know if the surfaces are clean. They can also contain sneezes and coughs, which protects those around you who may have vulnerable immune systems, which is a huge part of this. You may be wealthy, but the people around you, but the people around you may not be. As Trina was running low on fabric and unable to purchase more, she asked around to see if there was anyone willing to donate to a good cause. But she had no luck. She then reached out to Good News Network on Friday. The very same day, Good News Network received a press release from Joan Fabric Stores announcing that the U.S. company would begin donating materials to anyone looking to sew together masks, gowns, or other essential medical equipment for healthcare workers. After learning the Jones stores were launching the program on March the 23rd, they submitted Trina's order to the company and said the supplies would be mailed immediately to her in Somerdale, New Jersey. Brunella was thrilled to hear about the donation program and ordered 5 yards of flannel, and a couple of packets of 1/8 of an inch elastic. I just have this warm, little fuzzy feeling going on right now, she told the Good News Network by phone. I'm so happy that they're doing something. I love Jones. Beyond just donated materials, Joan is offering ship to home or curbside pickup options so that customers won't need to come into the stores. The chain includes 865 stores across 49 states. But not all shops may be participating, so make sure that you phone them first. The amazing thing about the crafting community is that, especially in these difficult times, they're always looking for ways to help, said Wade McCollin, President and CEO of Joan. All open Joan locations will serve as collection points, too, so that people sewing in their own homes can drop off any items created, which will then be distributed to medical centers to help with their dwindling supplies. We are seeing hospital workers, organizations, and individuals coming into our stores for supplies to make these essential items. And our customers are asking us how they can help. Wade added, so many are spending their time and their money to help in this tragic situation. And we want to step in and do our part to protect these amazing people who are helping with the communities we serve. According to a press release on Joan's website entitled Need of Supplies, should contact Joan Plus at joan.com. Those are both Jones are with 2 N's. They say they will also open up their classrooms while adhering to the social distancing guidelines to anyone who wants to help make these essential items. Participating locations will offer sewing machines, materials, and guidance to help customers safely make face masks and covers, gowns, and other items to donate to the America hospitals. They also have some how-to guidelines online. We have a generous community who can make a big difference as our healthcare systems face this crisis. We're here to support them and all who make to give all year round. We're here to support them. We're all in this together. We are all in this together. And we need to remember that while we're, panic buying too much of our supplies or while we're going out, because it won't affect us, we need to remember that it's not just individual, it's the collective as a whole. And we have one more story, not about this, when we return from the break.
Pets bring such joy to our lives, and the GSMC Pets podcast is here to share in that joy. We'll tell stories of pets finding their forever homes, acting in unexpected ways, being helpful, or just being silly. Whether you love dogs, cats, llamas, reptiles, fish, or you've never met an animal you didn't like, the GSMC Pets podcast is for you.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about people sewing masks voluntarily so that we can stop the dwindling supplies. And now, a little bit of a shift change, just so that we can enjoy some other stuff. This is printed from Envision Kindness, and it's a first-person article, but I did not write it. It's not me. It's from Envision Kindness. In my exploration of how kindness connects people, it's become pretty clear to me that being kind to someone else uplifts both people and creates a positive link between them many times. I've read about how people feel good after they help someone through volunteering or even holding open a door. And I've felt it myself. If persuaded to explain why it feels good, it's clear that helping someone else, or simply witnessing kindness, sets off a series of changes in the brain, similarly to the release of endorphins, the internal opiates. Spiritually, of course, helping someone is the right thing to do. The biological connection between my spiritual understanding and how I feel suggests that nature has wired me to do so. My body is reinforcing and rewarding these quote-unquote right things with pleasurable sensations. Similarly, the receiver also feels good because he or she has been acknowledged or valued. Acts of kindness, therefore, create meaningful connections between people. It is part of what I've called the kindness connection cycle, in which acts of kindness connect the giver and receiver to one another. The focus of this class is the last arc of the kindness connection cycle, which states that meaningful connection increases kindness in turn. The central idea is that when we truly understand how each of our lives is intertwined with so many others, kindness, compassion, and collaboration flow much more naturally. Although we are unique individuals, our lives are part of a dynamic and vibrant larger network, which each of us does in that network influences many others, and vice versa. We're in this together. There are many different examples of how we are connected to each other, such as being connected through economics, interpersonal interactions, workplace, community, family, etc. One overlooked aspect of being connected to each other, however, is the common biology that we share. For example, blood courses through our arteries and veins before being filtered by the kidneys and pumped by a heart, which beats approximately 100,000 times every day. There are many systems that, with slight variation in function, the same way as healthy people, such as the regulation of blood sugar, blood pressure, and immune responses. And although we may differ in outward appearance, our bodies still generally work the same way. Beyond the systems that we have in common, we also actively share our biological lives with each other. Let's focus on oxygen, one of the most abundant elements of the planet, and it's absolutely critical for our survival. Inhaled oxygen requires us to use calories and convert them into energy fuel for our cells. This process then produces carbon dioxide, which we exhale as a byproduct. Life is not possible without oxygen. Let's imagine that you and I are hiking in a trail in the woods, and we stop to admire a vista. Much of the oxygen we're inhaling is probably produced by the trees and plant life. Yet, how did the tree make oxygen? Are other hikers gone through the forest trees, powered by the sunlight, absorb the carbon dioxide that's exhaled by the hikers so that they can transform it? O2 is then released from the CO2 the trees have absorbed, thus continuing the oxygen cycle between the hikers and the trees. This means that the oxygen I breathe to survive was used by someone else in the past to help them live as well, and will be used by someone else in the future. As oxygen is constantly being recycled and each person needs about 500 liters of oxygen per day, multiple authors have speculated on how we may have inhaled the same oxygen molecules as Julius Caesar, Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King Jr. The bottom line, our lives depend on sharing, and this extends across time. This example also illustrates how critically we are connected to trees and nature. Without plant life, oxygen wouldn't be produced, and carbon dioxide wouldn't be cleared. And since the earth half the oxygen comes from the earth and the ocean, this means our oxygen-dependent lives are also tied to the sea. When something disrupts these cycles, we share the problems that follow. What goes around comes around. Life is much about the cycles rather than the straight lines. Oxygen is just one of the many examples of that. So what does this teach us? It teaches us that our lives are more intimately connected than we might have ever thought. Beyond that, we're deeply connected by the oxygen cycle. It comes round to affect us. But the cycle is fragile. Without us doing the right thing to maintain our part, it can fail. Doing the right thing honors two principles: being kind and respecting to other members of the cycle. To sustain ourselves and our well-being. The eminent conservationist John Muir wrote, "When one tugs a single thing in nature, you'll find it attached to the rest of the world. That is, we are all connected." That comes from a writer of envisionkindness.org. And when we come back, we have our final segment, So that was just something to think about over the break.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. So before the break, we were talking about kindness and understanding that we're all connected. And I think right now more than ever, we're starting to feel that and see that across the world. So now, some good news from today's date in history. I'm recording this on the 25th of March. So that is the day that we're going to be covering. Happy 55th birthday to Sarah Jessica Parker, the producer and actress who plays Carrie Bradshaw, one of the greatest TV girls in history, on the HBO hit series Sex and the City. Over 6 seasons, her performances won her 2 Emmys, 4 Golden Globes, and 3 Screen Actor Guild Awards. Parker made her debut on Broadway at age 11, and 3 years later, she was starring in the title role of the musical Annie. She returned to the stage recently, starring with her husband, Matthew Broderick, in Plaza Suite. After the COVID-19 caused the closing of the theater, she posted a lovely message on Instagram. Broadway doesn't stay quiet for long. We'll be back. The Times Square will hustle and bustle. We count the days until the marquees are lit once again. In the meantime, we think of all those affected and hope for everyone's good health. The fashionista continues to work in television and in such films as First Wives Club, The Family Stone, and Failure to Launch. She's also a fashion designer. She owns a production company called Pretty Machines as well. So happy birthday to Sarah Jessica Parker. Some more good news on this date. The British Parliament abolished the slave trade in 1807 on today's date. The modern Olympics began in Athens, Greece in 1896. 97% of all Dutch physicians went on strike against the Nazi regime in 1943. While still in his 20s, Martin Luther King Jr. led 25,000 to the state capitol in Montgomery, Alabama in 1965. John and Yoko staged their first bed-in for peace in Amsterdam in 1969. WikiWeb, the world's first wiki, was made public by Ward Cunnington in Portland, Oregon in 1995. Dunkin' Donuts, Baskin-Robbins Company Community Foundation, gave $1 million to put food in backpacks for poor children to take home from school throughout America in 2014. And Gloria Steinem is 86 years old today. On this date in 2009, 13 Palestinian girls and boys from West Bank refugee camp traveled with their musical director to Israel to perform for elderly Holocaust survivors. Most of the audience at the Holocaust Survivor Center did not know the youths were Palestinians from such a rough area until it was announced. Amidst gasps, the orchestra began to play Songs for Peace, and the audience broke out into applause. The event was part of Good Deeds Day, an annual event at the center. And on this day, in 1944, a Royal Air Force sergeant survived a jump from 18,000 feet without a parachute. The 21-year-old World War II gunner decided when his Lancaster bomber was on fire, it was better to jump than to burn. His fall was broken by pine trees and soft snow, and he suffered only a sprained leg. Nicholas Stephen Alkmaid was subsequently captured and interviewed by the German Gestapo, who were initially suspicious of his claim to having fallen without a parachute until the wreckage of his aircraft was examined. He was celebrated as a prisoner of war before receiving a medal in 1945. Reportedly, the Germans gave Alkmaid a certificate testifying the fact, according to Guy Murchie in The World Aloft. Happy birthday as well to Sir John Elton, who turned 73 years old today. Growing up in London, the singer, songwriter, learned to play piano at age 3. In his 5-decade career, Elton John has sold more than 300 million records, making him one of the best-selling musical artists in the world. Sir Elton John has more than 50 top 40 hits, such as Rocket Man, Tiny Dancer, Benny and the Jets, and 7 consecutive #1 U.S. albums. His tribute single, repenned in dedication to the late Princess Diana, Candle in the Wind, in 1997, sold over 33 million copies worldwide and is the best-selling single in the history of the US and UK charts. And that is it for today's episode. And thank you for tuning into this again. These are hard times. We're trying to get through them as best we can together. I'm trying to find stories that don't have to do with this if you are sick of listening to it, but I gotta be honest, it's very difficult to find, so I can always dig into the archives if you really need to, but right now this is what the news is, unfortunately. So thank you for listening to the GSMC podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write us a nice review. That really helps us. The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast. Obviously you know because you just listened. But anyway, if you please follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you again for listening. Be safe. Have a good night. Bye.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmc.com. GSMCpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from social media news to marketing news, and even weird news, the GSMC Podcast Network has you covered. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast.